Okay, thank you. Well, welcome everyone to this last breakout session before the final keynote. In your brochures, it said Thomas Bartel was going to do this SDL presentation together with Malcolm, but I'm sort of standing in for Thomas as he had some things intervening in his agenda. Now, before handing over to Malcolm, who's going to do the bulk of the presentation, I want to just show a few slides and a bit of explanation about who SDL is. Many of you may know SDL as a sort of translation and localization company, which SDL still is. So there is a big translation group within our company. But there's also a second group, where I'm from, which is the CXM, Customer Experience Management Technologies Group, so to speak. We call ourselves Content and Analytics. And we are a group where quite a few software solutions are coming together. SDL has acquired a few companies in the last couple of years, and bringing all these products together in a way, what we call customer experience offering. Well, these are just a few numbers for your reference. We are a global company. We are present in 38 countries, 70 offices all over the world, 2,700 employees. Number is still rising. And you see that we still do a lot of translation. We almost translate 7 billion words every month. That's including automated and machine translation, which is a thing that we are also getting into and becoming good at more and more over time. E-commerce solutions, web content management, so more in the CXM stack that I'll be talking to in these first 5 or 10 minutes. Now, customer experience management, sort of a buzzword. What do we see as being customer experience management? The idea is that we try to unify your communication across what we call customer journey. So your customers will be engaging with you as a company, first of all, in the pre-purchase phase. They are looking for products and services out there in the market, and they're going to consider you, and they're going to be looking at what you have to offer on the website, but today more and more on the social media, what is being said about you as a company on Facebook, on Twitter, and things like that. So in the consideration phase, there's a lot for you to consider. Where do customers find information about our company, and what is the sort of experience that they get from that? So if you manage to sort of go through that pre-purchasing phase and get the customer buy your product or service, what we think is important is that you can retain that customer, because they move into a post-purchase phase where they may want to look for support materials, may want to be guided and learn your product. So they're going to take on the materials that you offer him, technical documentation for sure. And you try to then retain the customer and sort of keep him as a brand advocate and get him to sort of repurchase the same products and services from you instead of going to the competition. Now, to be able to sort of implement a successful global customer experience management solution, I think there's 3 requirements, 3 things that you need to consider. The first thing I want to shortly talk about is insights. You sort of have to understand your audiences and know what your customer is working with. Obviously your website, obviously your personal contact with your sales team. But as I said, also on the social media, where are people finding information about our company and about the products and services that we sell? Once you have that insight, you can use that to sort of orchestrate and align your organization. Make sure that your technical documentation tells the same message as your marketing website. Make sure that it is all aligned. If you have an e-commerce shop, make sure that the technical details they find there on that platform are the same as in your real technical documents. So orchestrate that across different channels, markets, languages, of course, and the teams inside your company. And only then you can really come to delivering that contextual experience that you want your customer to have. Then you want to be able, and you are able with the solutions, to create relevant experience. Your customers are after the information that they require, and only the information that they require at the moment in time that they require it, in the language that they require it, and on the device that they require it. And I can go on and have a few parameters in there as well. So this is what you all need to get aligned to get that unified customer experience across these different channels. And SDL has brought together a stack of products. There's quite a few products that, well, aren't really directly in technical communication, so to speak, but there is your analytics tools that analyze what our customers are saying about you. There is your globalization management, SDL still have the tools to streamline your translation processes. There is content management, and within the SDL portfolio, there is now a web content management. Some of you may know Tridion. There is a component content management, which Malcolm is certainly going to talk about, so that's really oriented to the technical documentation. And then we have more marketing tools to sort of streamline your marketing campaigns, your product launches, your email campaigns that you are doing, all to try and get your customers that real-time, personalized message. Know what he is after, know what he is interested in, and deliver what he wants to read about you in the multiple channels. So it's omni-channel delivery in all the platforms and tools and things that he will be using. So we bring that together in sort of 7 different product stacks: analytics, social intelligence, documentation, e-commerce solutions, language solutions for your translation, campaign management, and web content management. I've touched upon a few of these. I sort of want to keep it at this because, well, it is a technical communication conference that we are at. And then I want to hand over to Malcolm, who's going to do the sort of reference presentation on what CD Adapco did for unifying their technical documentation. So the focus is now on the documentation product, live content, and Malcolm will be presenting what CD Adapco did with this.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you very much. Allow me just to switch the presentations. Where are we? Here we go. Yes, so as Colin said, Thomas was going to be here, but Colin has stood in for Thomas. And actually, Colin was one of the first people that we met with when we started to engage with SDL. Was that in Amsterdam? It may have been in Amsterdam. That was our first sort of contact with SDL. Who are CD Adapco? I should point out that these gentlemen don't work for CD Adapco. But if you want to understand what CD Adapco actually does, how we make money, then you do have to go back to these 2 gentlemen, Claude Navier and Sir George Stokes. Because back in the 18th, 19th century, these gentlemen, no doubt curious types, perhaps they observed the motion of smoke rising off a fire. Perhaps they asked themselves the question, is that motion of the smoke, is that random? Or is there some deep mathematical principle at work behind the motion? And of course there is. And these 2 chaps, I don't think they ever met each other, but somehow they came up with the equation of motion of a fluid, now popularly known as the Navier-Stokes equations. I don't know how much people could do with them in the 19th century. But in the 20th century, towards the second half of the 20th century, companies such as CD Adapco, several clever people in universities, they worked out how to take these equations of motion and apply numerical methods to use them to solve real engineering problems. And so you have CFD, computational fluid dynamics, and that's what CD Adapco, that's how it really started. The company is now moving into a much broader range of engineering analyses, moving into stress analysis, just all about structural behavior, electromagnetics, batteries, full range of engineering situations. And if you're interested, you can find out more on our website. Here's just one example of a marine simulation. This is what we call a free surface flow, so we're actually simulating the motion of a ship over the surface of the waves, and you can prescribe what kind of wave you want to send to the ship, but there's many other types of industry. CD Adapco is involved in aerospace, motorsport, internal combustion engines, chemical processing, nuclear industry, defense. There was one nice picture of a missile coming away from an aircraft wing, but I didn't put that on here in case it gets into the wrong hands. But that's the kind of thing that CD Adapco does. The documentation team, there are 8 of us. The gentleman at the bottom, Demos, he is part-time. I did remove all the surnames in case this also gets into the wrong hands. It's very difficult to find people who actually want to work in this kind of thing, so once we've got a hold of them, we've got to try and keep them. This is how we divide the work between the team. Karen is also here, colleague Karen, and Karen is doing our electrochemistry, corrosion, combustion, anything to do with chemistry. Karen was a high school chemistry teacher, so we thought that would be a good place for her to work. In the past, so I didn't actually have a slide showing what we used to do and what we're still doing for some of our documentation. We were using FrameMaker, storing our files as binary files in CVS for source control. But probably about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, we started to think about how we could change our process. And you might ask, well, why did we want to start to change our process? So one problem we were coming up against was very large FrameMaker files. As the product grew, as different areas within the product grew, so the documentation expanded, and we were having some FrameMaker files with over sort of 300 or 400 pages. And that becomes very difficult to work with. You might say, why not break them up? But that's equally difficult to do, because we have over 400 FrameMaker files making up the documentation set. So that was one driver for change. Another problem was that you have to have a FrameMaker license to use FrameMaker. Most of our developers are on Linux, so that introduces a barrier, because FrameMaker is a Windows tool. And also, it's expensive to translate files from FrameMaker. Good for the translation company, but not so good for ourselves. So we began to think about, well, let's just dream about the kind of thing that we might want. And this is our first attempt. This is my first sort of Microsoft clipart attempt. Before we knew any of the real terminology, this is just like, this is what we like. So instead of just a documentation team writing the documentation, typically we get sort of PDFs generated from LaTeX, and then we retype them all in FrameMaker and send it back for review. We thought, why not have some kind of system where anybody who's suitably qualified, Isaac Newton could have been involved if he was employed. Anyone suitably qualified could contribute to the documentation. That was a kind of grand idea, a bit like a wiki. The problem with a wiki is that it's just a wiki. You really want the content in a nice, neat, clean format that you can use in other places. Then we started to learn what the actual technology was. We realized that actually we want a component content management system, not a content management system. There's all sorts of content management systems out there. Important to have that little one in there. So we always try to say component content management system. So this was the kind of idea of the system that we wanted. I showed that slide to my boss. He thought it was a dreadful slide. No style, no layout. So he spent quite a few hours cleaning it all up, different sort of color coding. And the idea was that you'd have this process for the content creation, where other people within the company, including the technical authors, but other people within the company would be able to use, ideally online, web-enabled authoring tools to contribute content. That content would all go into this great big content management system. The documentation team would, we'd apply our linguistics analysis. We use Acrolinks. We've used Acrolinks for a number of years, so we'd be able to clean up the content, and also from that system send it out for translation. And then at the far end, we've got the publication tools. And what I didn't have on this slide, but what you could add is just like a feedback system, so that any comments that come from the published content come back into the system, so some kind of feedback capturing. So that was the vision that we had a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And then we came across SDL Live Content. Now this is the official SDL slide for the Live Content product stack. We don't use all of this. We only use a subset of the tools. In fact, I kind of rubbed out the ones that we don't use. So for our authoring tools, we're using XMetal now. We do have FrameMaker still. We also have one license of Oxygen developer, but our main tool for authoring is now XMetal. And that's for the documentation team. So the documentation team have XMetal authoring bridge, which plugs into the content management system. For occasional authors, so the rest of the company, we're using the SDL Live Content Create tool, and that's a web-based XML editor. So it's an actual editor that appears in your XML in your web browser. And SDL have also integrated within that Create environment. On our behalf, they've integrated an equation editor from Design Science. So the content management system, the main part of that is Architect. Architect is the CCMS, if you like. Architect feeds into the Ditto Open Toolkit. So that's what SDL use for publishing from Architect, is the Ditto Open Toolkit. And also feeds into the live content reach portion. So that is the kind of dynamic online publishing or delivery platform, if you like. And that's the system that allows you to leave comments. So once our content is published to this reach portal, we can have people add comments. So that's really the final system as it stands. For localization, Architect itself has facilities for sending out or collating and sending out the content for translation, and we find that a great benefit just in itself. So we haven't paid for the other SDL translation components. We're relying on Architect. For publishing, we're using WebWorks ePublisher. We've had very good experience with ePublisher. We've always had good results, good support from them. That's for the HTML output, and for PDF we're using Antenna House. So that's the system, or the schematic diagram of the system. This is a little video. Don't know if Matt Pierce is in the room. Don't think he is. You'll not see how bad our videos are. This is someone logging into Architect from the web client. So if you're on the web interface, this is what you would see when you go into Architect. So you can see that the user here has gone into the repository. You get a typical tree structure for your content, so it looks like folders. This is the same as you might have on your File Explorer on Windows. I don't know if this video is still going. No, it stopped. I'll just press play again. Good job, Matt Pierce is not here. That's probably a kernel problem with videos. But anyway, you can drill down into your file system, and you'll eventually come to your topics. So I'm going into the electromagnetism module. I'm looking at one of our tutorials. And here you can see that we've got a separate set of folders for each type of content. So in the SDL system, you separate your images from your maps, and your maps from your topics. They're all in separate folder types. And that just helps to keep things neatly categorized. Within the topics have versions, so there's version control built into the system. Here I'm looking at some topics in that particular folder, and when I click on one of them, you'll see the different versions coming up at the bottom of the page. And each topic has a workflow. The SDL system has workflow built in for the topics. And one important thing about the SDL system is that it doesn't rely on file names. So a big problem with our previous system was that every file had a location on disk, had a file extension. We used a lot of hyperlinks in FrameMaker. Very difficult to restructure that kind of content. This system, everything is based on GUIDs, globally something identification. It's a unique number. The idea is that things which have a GUID are probably the only things in the whole world that have that GUID. That gives your topic significance in the world. It means it can be anywhere you want on the SDL system, and Architect will find it. So as long as it's in the repository, everything is referenced with GUIDs. So different elements within the data topics, the IDs are based on GUIDs. That's all. No language, no version, just a GUID. For example, if you want to do an href to an image in this system, you give it the GUID. And the SDL tools, the tools that integrate with XMetal, they all understand GUID. So when you are in XMetal and you want to add an image reference, that all is built into the SDL plugin for XMetal. So I would say that in itself is a very strong reason for moving to a content management system. At least for us, that was certainly the case, because you can move topics about. Doesn't matter where you put them, the system will track them down. Now, the authors themselves, we don't tend to use the web client for everything. Our day-to-day work is with a tool called Publication Manager. So in DITA, you have maps and you have topics. But what SDL have done is to wrap this publication object around the maps. Here's a map here, ohmic heating, domestic fuse, and the topics within the map. So those things are contained within a publication. Now, you wouldn't actually... It's not one map per publication. You can use your maps as many times as you like, and as many different publications as you like. But the publication contains all of these items. The publication also allows you to define variables. So if you've got data variables defined in your system, the publication will show you what you've got defined. And also in the publication, you define your output. So different types of output format for this particular publication. Now, this is just one tutorial, so we wouldn't normally publish that on its own, but it could be the installation guide or the release notes. So for that publication, I might want to have a PDF. I might have DITA XML output. That's the output that we feed into WebWorks, which then becomes our HTML output. And also, we can send our output to Live Content Reach. That's the dynamic delivery platform. So day to day, that's what we're working with. Publication Manager, also with XMetal. And in order to handle the equations, we've purchased the MathFlow editor from Design Science. That's proven to be quite effective, and that saves the equations natively in MathML format. Just some hints here. I'm not going to go into the whole of the publishing process that we do, because as I said, Architect uses the DITA Open Toolkit. So we're also using WebWorks, but if you're only using the DITA Open Toolkit, particularly for PDF, then you would have to create your own customizations and add them to the SDL copy of the Ditto Open Toolkit. One book that we found tremendously helpful, almost like it was designed to come out just at the right time for us, October 2013, Ditto for Print. One of our colleagues, Marta, she didn't know anything about the Ditto Open Toolkit, but she spent time with this book and a Ditto Open Toolkit, and she created a whole set of style sheets for our PDF publication. Another tip here, actually, which came from one of the SDL engineers, we did try to find some training on XSLT, because obviously the Ditto Open Toolkit is based on XSL, and we eventually came across, or rather the SDL engineer put us onto this course on udemy.com, which has proved to be quite a good course, very cheap. One point about Udemy: don't buy the course the first time you log in. Log in, sign up, wait a few days, they'll send you an email offering you 50% off any course. Wait a few more days, they'll offer you 75% off any course. So just wait, be patient, and you'll get a very effective and very cheap course on XSLT. One of the big challenges that we always face in CD-DAPCO is mathematical expressions. This here is just it's just a screen capture of a typical academic paper. I've no idea what it's about. Still no idea what it's about. But you can see how they arrange the equations. Equation, number, and then they reference the equations. So, in the text that refer to equations such and such. In an online version of this, you would want these equations to be hyperlinks, because you might be in one part of the documentation, the equation that you're interested in could be somewhere else. You want to be able to click on that link and jump to the equation. What SDL have done for us, very helpfully, was to essentially preempt or anticipate the Ditto 1.3 standard. So as far as we're aware, in Ditto 1.3, we'll have elements, these three elements: equation inline for inline symbols, just Greek symbols within a sentence. Equation block, that might be for an equation that you don't necessarily want to number, perhaps an intermediate step in a derivation. And then equation display for the equations where you want to add that little number on the side. And these are also the ones that you might want to use as cross-reference destinations. So say this is all kind of coming, I believe, in Ditto 1.3. SDL very helpfully did that for us. So we have essentially a customized set of DTDs based on Ditto 1.2, but they handle all of the equations. One thing we have discovered is that in order to get the cross-references to work, you have to have this title element within the equation. That's just a little tip in case you are going to get involved with equations. We suppress this in the output, so this doesn't actually show up, but it seemed to be necessary to get the cross-references to work. So here's what we've got. This, in the background, is a genuine output from our system. So you can see that title element that I showed you in the last slide is suppressed. We've got our numbers on the right-hand side, and we've got cross-referenced elements to those equations. Another little tip, actually, if you're going to do cross-referencing to equation displays, and this would also apply to Fig elements in Ditto, leave out any text. The XREF element should be empty, and then Ditto Open Toolkit will automatically generate that text and the number. WebWorks, tremendous job for us. They really helped us out, because with SDL's help, we were able to apply this to PDF, but the WebWorks chaps did it for the HTML. So we now also have the same kind of output in our online help in HTML, and that's using WebWorks ePublisher. Just a quick example of Reach and how we hope to use the Reach environment. So Reach is the online sort of delivery portal, if you like, for SDL. Now, what I've just shown here, we have a whole bunch of tutorials in our content. Not sure how many there actually are, but probably over 80, maybe getting on for 100. And these tutorials look at different kind of engineering situations, if you like, and they walk people through different situations. Our software is released 3 times a year. From one release to the next, there's no real guarantee that the developers won't have changed something so much that the tutorial instructions are no longer valid. So we do go to a tremendous effort to test our tutorials. We've actually got three approaches to testing tutorials. We have 2 automated tests, and also each release, a subset, are manually tested. And that's all handled by the testing team. We don't have to do that, fortunately. We don't have the resources to do that, but the testing team handle all of our tutorials testing. And what they do is, when they find problems with the tutorials, They create this. This is Jira, the issue tracking system that we use. They'll create this Jira issue, if you like, little ticket, and they will actually spend quite a lot of time just explaining exactly when and where our tutorials have problems. And you can see here they've described, the location of the problem, what's wrong, different screenshots that they've compared. And for them, that must be quite time-consuming. Because sometimes we actually say, well, to be honest, it's all cosmetic. And we'll just click, won't fix, and send it back. But sometimes they do actually come up with genuine problems. So what we want to do is to use the Reach system, and this is a view of Reach. So this is the online environment that SDL provide. This is Reach. This is our tutorial guide in Reach. And here, I'm pretending that I'm a tutorials tester, and I've gone into our content, find a problem in this page, and what the tester is doing, they've highlighted the location of the problem, and they're now adding a comment to say what the problem is. I'll just continue that there. 10 minutes to go. I think we're okay. So they're now saying what the problem is. So let's say that the property name is no longer parts, it's now inputs. And that kind of change does happen in the software. SDL have customized this for us so that you have to enter a JIRA number now, along with a comment. And also that JIRA number, once it's entered, is active, so you can click on it, and it will take you to the issue in JIRA. So the basic system, out of the box, doesn't have this JIRA connection. That's something that SDL have added for us. We did a sort of trial, like a pilot project with a few testers to see what they thought of this system. And they all said that it was much easier to use this system for reporting the feedback and tutorials than to sort of manually type everything up in the JIRA task. We hope to roll that out to all of the testing team over the next couple of months. And it will be interesting to see just how much time is saved using this approach. That's just one kind of example workflow that we've proposed with Reach. We also hope to use it to get feedback from subject matter experts. One of the big problems we have is that on Linux, there doesn't seem to be any, Adobe Reader goes up to version 9 on Linux, goes up to version 11 on Windows. So on Windows, you can actually annotate PDFs for free. Because you don't want to pay for a PDF annotation tool necessarily. But on Linux, you can't do that. So when we send a PDF to a developer, they can't actually add comments to it. So that kind of whole review channel is not possible. So what we hope to do is we'll send them a link to the relevant publication or the relevant topic in Reach. They'll log in and leave the comments in Reach. And again, that will hopefully make for a much more efficient process. This one final slide. So SDL, the architect system, it doesn't actually come with a task scheduling system. In CD Adapco, all of our documentation jobs are controlled by Jenkins. So Jenkins is an extensible, open source, continuous integration server. Bit of a mouthful. But it's just an online portal. It's very clever, actually. You set up jobs. You give them scripts, DOS scripts, shell scripts, which machine you want it to run on. And that system will trigger these jobs. So our documentation build jobs are all driven from the command line. WebWorks Automap allows you to do that. So these jobs will actually, they'll download the source, they'll feed it through the tool, they'll zip up the output and swallow the output back up into the system. And then all these jobs are connected. So the output of our documentation job gets fed into some other job which packages it up, and eventually it all ends up within the installer. So that was really important that we were able to automate the documentation process. So what was missing was this connection from Jenkins that would allow us to pull the content off of SDL into the build workspace. We're really fortunate. Well, two things actually. One is that the architect comes with a full API. So it has some sort of web-based API. I'm probably not saying it rightly. Web Services API. Very well documented. They have an API for Architect, API for Reach. And our database group, they hired someone in the summer to do integration work. So the chap in the database group, he's spent several weeks now, and he's actually created a command line interface for us to SDL Architect. So that allows us to automate our publishing jobs. We can trigger a publishing job, we can download the result, and feed that into Jenkins. So that API has proved to be extremely useful. We've been able to write this connection between architect and the build system. Now, we're pretty much out of time. A few things I haven't covered. I haven't covered data migration. That's been a huge job for the doc team over the past few months. But if anyone does have any questions or comments, then we've probably got 5 or 10 minutes in which to do so. We'd just like to say thank you to SDL for inviting me to speak here. We've certainly enjoyed working with SDL. It's been quite an adventure. Very intense. We'll be glad when the project's done and we can just use the system without having to worry about getting it all to work. But it's very close to being finished, and we're very happy with the SDL system, live content. So thank you. Any questions for, I guess, either Koen or myself? Over here.
How much of your FrameMaker stuff have you managed to convert?
We'll soon be done, actually. We're hoping to be done by the end of October. Not sure how much content we've got. It's probably over like 1.2 million words, or 430 FrameMaker files. We took 2 approaches. We wrote our own tool in FrameMaker, which actually sort of extracts all the content and puts them into data topics for us. And we also used Stelo Migrate. So Stelo Migrate is like an online portal. That particularly is useful for converting equations. So Stelo Migrate will convert equations. So a lot of our equations were concentrated in one section of the user guide. So we fed all of those FrameMaker files through Stelo Migrate. So the current plan is to be finished by the end of October and then send it out to our translation partners to deal with. So John Fisher of ITR sitting in the corner there. So he could probably tell you the pain of data migration from a translation perspective. But it's been a big project.
Did you say it was about 18 months ago?
So I think we started talking to SDL. We probably started talking to SDL about 2 years ago, and then sort of getting seriously, discussions about 18 months ago. And I think we actually officially started last September. So it's been about 12 months since we officially started the project. Yep.
Just to put the last question more in context,
Mm-hmm.
you've mentioned your documentation team. How big is it? Thinking about conversion.
So there's 8 of us, including myself. 8 full-time. There's one chap who's part-time, but he only comes in sort of on a contract basis for a legacy product. So there's 8 of us full-time. And we have 3, like our development cycles is 4 months. So it's been quite challenging to try and do our usual work and convert the FrameMaker topics. So yeah, 8 of us. Any other questions? Nope.